Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another lesson in this week in the Torah portion. This week we studied the portion of Shemot, and we're starting from selections from Likutei Sichos, the second talk of the Rebbe on Shemot. Just a short introduction. Our discussion today is going to be about Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is one of God's commandments. Lashon Hara is gossip or malicious talk, words against somebody. They may not, as we'll discover, and it's part of the law, it may not be intended to be a malicious talk. Even when one praises another, it might enter into what they call the dust of Lashon Hara. Dust means it has the dust, it has a little bit of a feel of Lashon Hara, and it is unacceptable. How does it fit within this week's Torah portion? So very briefly, we read about the previous generations are all died, the children of Israel, of Yaakov, the sons, Joseph. A new king arose and he forgot, made himself that he has no idea of the history of Egypt. And now he's fearful of the Jewish people. We have a Jewish problem. We need to make sure that they do not expand, and we need to make sure they don't leave the country. What's the technique they're going to use? Let's enslave them. In a very sly way, they got them into getting to be enslaved. And now, if we enslave them, they have no time for family time, and they will not grow. They will not have families, because what do I need children for? Should they be enslaved again? But the Torah testifies, God testifies in the Torah, "V'cha'asher ya'anu oto," as much as they enslave and hurt the Jewish people, ken yirbe v'chen yifrotz, so they will expand and multiply. Why? God made miracles. They would have 6 children at one time. So the more you press the Jewish people, the greater they become. Just like an olive, they are compared to an olive. The oil, which is the greatest quality of a liquid, comes only when you press it. On its own, you won't find the oil. Then we read about a young man that is born to the leader of the Jewish people, Amram and Yocheved. He marries her after the decree of every firstborn child should be thrown into the Nile. He remarries her after his daughter's rebuke. Miriam, he's telling him that he's worse than Pharaoh. And he remarries her. The Jewish people follow the leader and they remarry their wives. A child is born. Right away they saw he's very unique, very special. After 3 months, they put him in the basket in the Nile. And the daughter of Pharaoh comes down to wash in the Nile. As the Midrash tells us, that she came to convert, to get rid of all the idols of a house and to go to the mikveh. And she finds the child, she has mercy on him, and she decides to adopt him. She names him Moshe. Moshe, which translated to, I pulled him out of water. And he refuses to eat from anyone except Miriam, who was watching the whole time. She came out and said, I can give you a wetner from the Jewish women. It looks like a Hebrew child. And of course, she called the mother, Yocheved. Yocheved fed him and took care of him until he was mature enough to eat salad. So 24 months, and she got paid for it. Once he was not breastfeeding, she returned him back to Pharaoh's daughter. And Pharaoh's daughter treasured him and loved him, and he was the jewel crown. He was a prince in the house of Pharaoh. As he matures, he goes out and he sees an Egyptian officer eating a Jewish slave. So he kills the man and he buries him in the sand because he realized there is nobody around to watch him. Next day, he comes out and he sees 2 Jewish people, 2 Hebrews, who are hitting each other. One was raising his hand to hit the other, and Moshe says to him, "Wicked, you are wicked even by raising your hand against somebody. Why are you doing it?" And the other guy says to him, or the same guy turned to him and says, what, you going to kill him like you killed the one from yesterday? And Moshe says, now I know the news is spread. People are aware that what I did. Pharaoh finds out, get hold of the news. They go and tell Pharaoh. And Pharaoh wants to kill him. A miracle happened. He was able to escape and he runs away. We read about Moshe only 60 years later or 40 years later. Some say it was 20 at the time. Some say it was 40. But for 40 years, for sure, he's gone. When we find him again is when he's 80 years old. Much later when God appears to him, etc. This is the introduction to our discussion. And the words that Moshe says, now I know, the simple interpretation is, now this thing that I did is known to everybody. But the Rashi and the Medrash says, turn it back against the Jewish people. What Moshe says is, now I know why they are enslaved. The reason they are enslaved is because they talk Lashon Hara. They are gossiping and they speak bad about each other. Rashi goes on to say the same thing again, that they are unworthy of redemption to get out of slavery as long as they speak Lashon Hara. And the Rebbe has a lot of trouble with it because since when Lashon Hara is such a powerful sin that that's the reason they should be enslaved. Or as Rashi is saying later on, that they are unworthy of getting redeemed. You can say idol worshiping is a reason. You can say murder, idolatry. These are major, major sins. But Lashon Hara is one of 613 commandments. Why is it singled out? And this is the talk of the Rebbe. So we're starting on page 19. I'm going to read and skip and read and skip. And the verse, Moshe became frightened, and he said, the matter has indeed become known. Medrash Tanchuma explains that Moshe realized that the son and Aviram, the two individuals who would challenge him, would inform on him to Pharaoh. As a result, he exclaimed, there is malicious gossip, Lashon Hara among you. How will you be worthy of redemption? He turns to him and says, if that's what you do, Lashon Hara, you don't deserve to get redeemed by God. Explanation is necessary. Our sages relate that despite the fact that there were idolaters among them during the Egyptian exile, the Jews were redeemed from Egypt. If so, why was Moshe so certain that the presence of malicious gossip among them would make the Jews unworthy of redemption? Why would the sin of malicious gossip alone bring about such a serious consequence? The Rebbe said, I don't understand. We are told that the Jewish people are worshipping idols. They are idol worshippers like the Egyptians. And yet they are worthy of being redeemed. But the Lashon Hara, now it's not going to let you out.
What up until this point, Moshe had not learned anything because he was taught the Torah when he was in the desert. Was he learned it?
Who told you that you studied the Torah in the desert? The Medrash actually says that Aaron, they knew about Moshe. So secretly they would go and teach him, they would study, he would spend time with his father.
Okay, thanks.
True. Our sages emphasize that gravity of the prohibition against malicious gossip, saying anyone who speaks malicious gossip is considered as if he denied God's existence. The Talmud tells us that someone who speaks Lashon Hara, malicious gossip, is considered like he's denying that there is a God. By the way, Lashon Hara is telling the truth, not fabricating stories. Moreover, they state, anyone who speaks malicious gossip increases his sins to the degree that they correspond to the three cardinal transgressions: the worship of false deities, forbidden intimate relations, and bloodshed. In other words, there are three cardinal sins on which a person may not disobey God with, even at the cost of his life. Lashon Hara is equal to all or surpassed all three. The matter is nevertheless perplexing. The Jews actually worshipped false deities, and yet that did not prevent the redemption. How could it be that the sin of malicious gossip, which is only comparable to such worship, had such an effect? To say that it is worse than idol worship, because idol worship is not going to stop them from going out, but Lashon Hara will stop them. How can you say that? We also see our sages view the extreme seriousness of malicious gossip, even in comparison to idolatry, as a factor in the context of victory in war. As the Talmud Yerushalmi states, that the people of David's generations were all righteous nevertheless, because there were malicious gossipers among them. When they went out to war, there were those who fell in battle. The people of Ahab's generations were idolaters nevertheless, because there were no malicious gossipers among them. When they went out to war, they were victorious. The Gemara says, the Rebbe says, the Gemara tells us that David, when he sent out his soldiers, those soldiers were ritually holy. They were pure of sin. However, many of them will die during battle. The reason is because there were gossipers among them. Ahab was one of the worst kings, and they worship idols so much in the temple itself. They would hide the idol behind the door so the prophet shouldn't be able to see it. In the holy temple, they worship. Yet when they go to wage wars against the Palestinians and all the other enemies, they would always be victorious and no one will die. Why? Because they had a unity among them. They did not speak bad about each other. So we see the power of Lashon Hara is very, very strong, that it prevents someone from getting killed in battle. That passage, however, teaches merely that peace and harmonious relationship that led to the lack of malicious gossip and strife bring about victory in war. What is the connection between these factors and the redemption of the Jewish people? That's question one. And why are they so fundamental that the redemption of the Jews from subjugation to other nations is dependent upon them? Says Rabbi, okay, we see how powerful it is to save lives. But why is this the reason for them to remain in exile under the rulership of a foreign nation? Number two, why are they unworthy to be redeemed by God? Moreover, the comments of the Medrash on this verse highlights to an even greater degree how the sin of malicious gossip impedes the redemption. Why? Moshe was contemplating in his heart, saying, what sin could Israel have possibly committed that caused them to be subjugated more than all other nations? After hearing the words of the Israelites who challenge him, he says, there is malicious gossip among them. Now, how will they be worthy of redemption? Therefore, he said, the matter is indeed become known. That is, now I know what is causing their subjugation. The Medrash tells us that Moshe in his heart was going out. He sees a whole large family who are all slaves. He says, what makes them to be slaves? It does not make sense for God to allow it. Only after he hears them speak in Lashon Hara, that they start speaking about what he did, and they're about to report to Pharaoh, he says, now it settles my question. Now I understand why are they enslaved by other nations. Rashi underscores this concept more explicitly in his commentary on the Torah regarding Moshe's fear, but he initially states, this is Rashi, according to the Medrash, he was worried because he saw in Israel wicked men, malicious gossipers. He said, if this is so, perhaps they do not deserve to be redeemed. And on the phrase, the matter has indeed become known, Rashi states, now Rashi adds another paragraph again. According to the Medrash, says Rashi, Moshe thought, the matter I was wondering about, how did the Israelites sin more severely than the other 70 nations of the world, so that they were subjugated with backbreaking labor, has become known to me. Indeed, I see that they deserve it. So Rashi is twice, one next to each other. The first is said, now I understand why they're not getting redeemed. The second one, he says, I was always wondering, why are they being enslaved worse than all 70 nations? Now I know, because they because they speak Lashon Hara. According to this understanding, the presence of wicked men, malicious gossipers, among the Jews were not only a reason why they were not worthy of redemption, but also why they were deserving of being subjugated with backbreaking labor, more than all 70 nations. This is puzzling. How is the sin of malicious gossip more severe than other sins to the extent that it caused the Jews to suffer in this manner? So the first question, the Rebbe says, look, Rashi is pointing out 2 points. Rashi says, the matter says that I was wondering why God is not taking them out. Now I know why. Then Rashi says, I was wondering why are they enslaved more than the other 70 nations. Now I know why. In other words, everything is accommodated. Everything is explained. Once he sees them speaking Lashon Hara. Idol worship, adultery, murder, it doesn't matter. What matters? Lashon Hara. That's the first question. Why is it so severe more than any other? It doesn't say that someone on the account of Lashon Hara should give up their life. If someone says, tell me what he said, and it's bad, or I kill, we have to violate the Torah law and share. We're not allowed.
Harry did it.
But when it comes to idolatry, adultery, and murder, there is no way we are allowed to disobey God. We must give up our life. And yet Moshe, there are 2 points, there are 2 stages here. One, I was wondering why God did not take him out of exile. Now I know. Second is, I was wondering, why are they in slavery? Why are they enslaved? Why are they different than 70 nations? Now I know why. Lashon Hara. Yes.
So this is the same thing is telling us that the Jews were the worst in the world with Lashon Hara. With all the other nations were not that kind of.
Well, that's the next question the Rabbi says.
Yeah.
Who says they are worse than 70 nations?
Right.
Who says that the Jews speak Lashon Hara more than the other nations? Perhaps everybody is the same. What does led Moshe to say, now I understand why are they enslaved and not other than 70 nations? Perhaps the 70 nations speak Lashon Hara too. The next question the Rebbe is asking, I want to skip and get to the point. The next question, the Rebbe says, the real danger to Moshe is not Lashon Hara. It's the telling to Pharaoh that he killed an Egyptian officer and Pharaoh wants to kill him, right? So why? So when he says Moshe, it says Moshe feared because it says now the matter is known. The simple explanation is he feared for his life. And why did he fear for his life? Because they're telling Pharaoh what I did. Yet Rashi says he feared that they will never come out of exile. He feared because I don't know why are they enslaved. And now it's all explained. It's all accommodated. Now I'm calmed down. I understand. In other words, Rashi puts an emphasis on Lashon Hara, which is a side part of the discussion here. When they tell him, you're going to kill us like you killed the other guy, and we're going to tell Pharaoh, the fear should, in the simple way, is about telling Pharaoh. The fear is that Pharaoh is going to chase him. And by the way, says the Rebbe, that's why the Torah tells us the story. Otherwise, it makes no sense to mention that story because what teaching does it come? The only reason you need to know is that you need to understand that Moshe had to run away. Why did he run away? Because 2 Jews went and told Pharaoh about his killing of the Egyptian. Yet Rashi says, Vayira Moshe feared not about his own life. He feared, why are they in exile? He feared, in other words, it didn't settle in his head. He feared, why is God not taking them out? Enough is enough. And then Rashi said, now the matter is known. Now I know why. I see them speak Lashon Hara, which is not the main part of the story. It's a side story. Do you understand that, Ali?
You have not explained yet why Lashon Hara is worse than the other 3. You're saying
that's one question.
Yeah, that question hasn't been answered.
No, and the Rebbe is asking many questions.
Right.
The second question the Rebbe is asking, why Rashi breaks it into 2.
Okay.
Rashi says the first part, Rashi says that I was wondering, why are they enslaved? Now I know why. The second part, Rashi says, I was wondering why they are not redeemed. Now I know why, that they are not worthy of redemption. That's number one. Second question, says the Rebbe, what makes Lashon Hara so bad that it's worse than the three cardinal sins?
I'm waiting for the answer.
Number three, who says, Rashi says that what settled down the question in Moshe's head is that they are worse than 70 nations because they speak Lashon Hara. From where did Moshe get the idea that they are unique in their way of speaking Lashon Hara? Perhaps other nations do speak also.
Right.
And number four, the question is, the real story, the simple story is his fear that they're going to report to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh wants to kill him, so he runs away. That's part of the text, the context. Yet Rashi takes it to the side and brings the Medrash that he said he feared that they will never be redeemed. He feared because he didn't know why they get enslaved. And he says, now it all settled down. Now I understand why, because they speak Lashon Hara. Nothing to do with him. Nothing to do directly with the story that appears after that Pharaoh heard, tried to kill him, and Moshe ran away. So it doesn't make sense why this story of Lashon Hara fits in here. So we have 4 questions, right? The Rebbe has a few more questions.
The taskmaster that Moshe killed, was he Jewish or Egyptian?
An Egyptian. It says, Vayar Ish Mitzri. It was an Egyptian man.
And he was bothered about what happened in his future, so he looked in the future so that he was worthy of anything, and that's why he...
Okay, let me clarify. Maybe that's what you meant. This man raped a girl, a Jewish girl. He decided to have a relationship with a Jewish girl, so he made their husband stay at work longer. While he was at work, he came into the house. There was no candles. They couldn't afford candles. She thought it's her husband. He did what he wanted, he left. When he left, the Jew came back. And he realized what had just happened. So the Egyptian went and killed him. He was a taskmaster. And he killed him for his own desire because he didn't want people to find out what he had done. Moshe, upon seeing what is going on, I'm sorry, he didn't kill the man. He was hitting him, so he shouldn't speak. Moshe, when he saw it, he saw that he deserved to die because 7 laws of Noah, one of them is that arayot, that they should respect the marriage of one another. And this guy violated it. He looked ko v'cho, vayabet ko v'cho, vayifen ko v'cho. He looked here and there. Says the Medrash, he looked to see in the future if there is anything good. Anybody who will convert to Judaism, anybody who will connect and bring positivity to Jewish people. He saw ki ein ish, that there is nothing good coming out of the man, so he killed him. That's it. What does that have to do with this? I don't know, but
I thought I was mistaken.
let's continue. So we remain with many questions. The main question, as Ali says, is since when Lashon Hara is so powerful, overpowering even a sin like murder, idolatry, and adultery. Because the Jewish people were very involved in adultery. I'm sorry, in idolatry, not adultery. In idolatry. Yet, they are worthy of getting redeemed, and they were redeemed. But when it comes to Lashon Hara, Moshe says, now the matter is settled. Now I know why they are not redeemed. Now I know why they deserve to be enslaved by another nation, because of speaking Lashon Hara. And it doesn't make sense. And as the Rebbe asked a few other questions. Yes, Raja.
What made Moshe think that he had the right to kill a man? Was Moshe a zealot? That gave him the right to kill a man because he saw the wrong?
I don't know. But you can say that he was a zealot because his grandfather Levi was a zealot, right? Because he killed the entire town of Shem. But
Yeah, no, I know.
But the real simple answer explanation, it's simple. He saw a man committing a crime and punishing another person for his desire. And this was so much of an injustice. And there was no one defending that Jew, that Israelite. And therefore he said, I have to take care of it. as the Mishnah teaches, if there is no one else who demand justice, this is each one of us responsibility. Here is the Rebbe's answer.
You have a page?
Yeah, we're going to read a little bit, page 24, number 4. It is possible to say that the core of the explanation of the matter is as follows. As is well known, the exodus from Egypt constituted the birth of a nation of the nation of Israel. Until then, the Jews were not a distinct nation. This is also evident according to the plain meaning of the Torah's words. It was only through the exodus from Egypt that the Torah indicates that they became a discrete nation, as reflected by the verse, to take a nation for himself from the midst of another nation. This concept that the Jews became a distinct entity unified them, making them one nation. From that time onward, the Jewish people had the stature of a nation. They were no longer merely a group of 70 people, 12 tribes or the like, descending from one family line. They received a new identity. Accordingly, I'll explain it in a moment. Accordingly, for them to be worthy of redemption, that is to be one distinct, independent nation, their conduct had to be appropriate. Division and strife, the opposite of the unity that should characterize one nation, were intolerable. Did you understand that?
Yeah, until the next paragraph.
Now, says the Rebbe, until they left Egypt, they were a large family. A large family is made up of many people with different opinions, different tastes, and different lifestyles. You have someone who spends a lot, someone who saves. You have someone who likes mountains, someone who likes valley. Every person is different. And therefore, as many units came together because they are coming from the same family, same father. That's great. But after coming out of Egypt, God is taking them out and making them a nation. You know what defines a nation? A nation is defined by people who are living for the same goal, one goal. If there is strife, it damages or it hurts the core of what defines a nation. Lashon Hara, gossip or malicious gossip, is what breaks the nation apart. And therefore, they are unworthy of redemption, because the only point of redemption is to make you a nation. But if you're unable to get along, you're not going to be a nation anyway. So it's a waste. Now I understand why they are not worthy of redemption. And now I understand why they deserve to stay, because of malicious. God is waiting for them to unite, and only then he can take them out. So far, so good. The Rebbe next paragraph, yes, Dick. If it's directly, of course.
I don't know.
All right.
Next.
Now, the next point the Rebbe says, every nation unites. Ali don't understand, so please pay attention to Ali's misunderstanding. The next paragraph, the Rebbe is asking, every nation is united for one goal. We unite one nation under one God, right? The American nation. We are united for human rights, for freedom, the Bill of Rights. This is what unites every individual, a Japanese, South Korean, Israeli, a Jamaican. They all come under the bill. The Constitution is what makes us together. So, says Rabbi, I don't understand. Why is it unique to the Jewish people? If you want every nation, they have to come
Unite.
together as one unit. Says the Rebbe,
The next paragraph, I do not understand.
We heard that.
Here is what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe says, let's look at the story the way the Rambam described the formation of the Jewish people. And we're not going to study it because it's going to take where are you going? The Rebbe says that if you read in Rambam describing the chronicles of the Jewish people, it starts with Abraham searching for God. God reveals himself. Then it continues on to Isaac, Jacob, and they go to Egypt. They almost forgot about God, except the tribe of Levi, who keep reminding them because they're not enslaved and they studied the Torah and they knew the tradition. And then God takes them out and chose them as his people. And the Rebbe says the distinction, according to Rambam, the Rebbe finds it in Rambam. I don't understand how he finds it in Rambam, but the Rebbe is very humble. The Rebbe says that the difference between the Jewish people before they became a nation and after is a major, major distinction. And that is something that's unique to the Jewish people. Take a look. Says the Rebbe, this passage highlights, we are page 26. This passage highlights the superior quality possessed by the Jews as a nation after the exodus from Egypt in relation to their status as a people before them. Based on Rambam, says the Rebbe, their status as a people before the exodus from Egypt and the giving of the Torah came about when, as Rambam states, there became a people within the world who knew God. The implication is that the people came into being on its own by virtue of the action of its members, Yaakov and his sons. Number B, the people's emergence and identity were defined by the knowledge of God. This knowledge united the members of the people, causing them to be defined as a unique entity. Says Rabbi, look in the Rambam, you will find that Rambam describes Jewish people, they search God, they found God, they worship God. So there are two, what defines them as a nation or as a unique group from among all other groups is that they search and found God, and they refrain from idol worship but serve God. So the emphasis here is on the people connecting to God. They established a connection. They devoted themselves to God. They found God, and therefore their children would follow the same path. Accordingly, there was a possibility for the nullification of the Jews' identity as people, as Rambam states, when, however, the Israelites' stay in Egypt was extended, they learned from the Egyptians did and began worshiping the stars as they did. Within a short time, the seeding that Abraham had planted would have been uprooted, and the descendants of Yaakov would have returned to the errors of the world and their deviations. Therefore, because they discovered God and they connected to God and the only one that worshiped God, what happened to it? We call it conditional. As long as you do it, you are a unique group. And therefore, Rambam writes that in Egypt, they almost forgot and almost very close to the fact that everything was have gotten lost because they started worshiping the stars and the moons and animals just like the Egyptians.
So where's
By contrast, at the time of the exodus from Egypt, God chose the Israel as his inheritance. This implies that three things. A, their distinction, the designation as a nation and a people resulted from God's choice and not the people's action. B, they came into being as a nation in a matter of where they were identified as an inheritance, that is, at that time, Israel became God's inheritance, and therefore, as such, it is not possible to speak of the Jews' existence as a nation as ever being nullified or ceasing. Why? For God's choice is eternal and not subject to change, nor will it cease. This is the implication of the term inheritance. For an inheritance, like someone inherits something, never ceases, but rather continues on as an ongoing legacy. Number three, okay, and now on this basis, the rabbi will explain. let's talk again. What the rabbi is saying is, based on Rambam, the Jewish Abraham gifted his children with belief in God. Yitzchak gifted to Yaakov, Yaakov to his children. Now, as long as they were in Egypt, they started learning from the behavior of the Egyptians, and says Rambam, Kim'at kat. It was so close that they almost lost everything that Abraham and Yitzchak invested in connecting to God, except the Levite tribe was able to return them back and keep reminding them. Says the Rebbe, there is a distinction, major distinction between before God chose us as a nation to after. Up to that point, it was their service of God, worship of God, that made them unique group. It was finding God and connecting to God. After, when God makes us a nation, it's God's choice. If it's God's choice, it has nothing to do with what I do. Just like an inheritance, we don't have enough time to talk about inheritance. If I gift you something, if I give any one of you a gift of $10, some of you may get angry. Why are you getting 10? You want 100 and throw it back to me. And therefore you did not accept the gift. Inheritance, the recipient don't have to agree. It's the only time you don't need to accept. So again, if I sell you something, there has to be a buyer. If I gift you, there has to be a recipient. If someone dies and he leaves a legacy, an estate, and there are children, they stand in his place. So there's no need for a recipient. That's the nachala. That's the uniqueness of inheritance. So when God chose the Jewish people, it has nothing to do with my conduct, because God, a true free choice, as the rabbi is going to go, free choice is not because of a unique feature to something. Otherwise, it's not a free choice. It's because of the needs, or because of the qualities of something. In other words, a free choice applies only when you have two equal apples, and then you choose one. It's a free choice. But you have an apple and an orange, you don't choose the apple. You like the apple. The apple, the doctor says an apple a day keeps the doctor away. That's why you took it. So you did not have a free choice. The idea of free choice is beyond this frame of discussion, but the free choice has to be equal. In other words, there was nothing special about the Jewish people that made God choose them. In fact, they were like every other Egyptian. And God chose them because of God's free choice. And therefore God made them his nation, meaning his inheritance, meaning it has nothing to do with my accepting, or it's not conditional. And that's unique about the Jewish people becoming a nation of God. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand that idol worship, adultery, or murder, albeit a very grave sin and angers God, it's not enough for God not to choose us. But Lashon Hara, breaking the unity among the people, is what hurts and prevent from us becoming a nation. And therefore, he says, now I understand why God does not redeem them. They can worship idols, but they're still worthy of redemption. They speak Lashon Hara, they're not worthy. Yes, now I'll address questions before we can get to the next step.
My question is, if the Jews did not receive the Torah until after they left Egypt, and Levites were studying and not being a slave, what were they studying?
So, according to the tradition, they knew all 613 commandments, and they studied it, and they knew it.
So I have another question.
Just a minute. That's why we read by Abraham that by Lot, when the angels come, it says, "Umatzot," he baked matzah and he gave them. Says the Talmud, it was Passover. And that's why you know Isaac was born on Passover, because they made a mark on the wall and said, next year when the sun reaches, that's when you'll have a son. So a year later, it was Passover. And there is other indications. God says, I'm not going to hide from Abraham what I'm going to do, because he's a fearful man. He teaches all my commandments and Torah to his descendants. In other words, there are many, many other places where we see that their forefathers studied the Torah. Levi was a yeshiva boy. There are Shem and Ever. Yeah, I don't want to go to that point because it's going to take much longer. But they follow the Torah.
Right,
Why is it worse?
so how,
Just a minute, just a minute. We're trying to build something. So now we had 4 or 5 questions. What's unique about the Jewish people speaking Lashon Hara? Now is this accommodated? All other 70 nations speak Lashon Hara equal to the Jewish people or not unique. But when God wants to choose us as a nation, in other words, it's coming now from above to down below. It's nothing to do with my choice. It's nothing to do with my conduct. It's nothing to do with my promise to God. That cannot happen unless we are united. And therefore, Moshe says, I was wondering, why are they enslaved? Now I know why. I was wondering, why is they not going to be, they're not getting redeemed by God? Now it makes sense. God does not want to redeem them if they are unable to be together, as we'll discover. So murder or idol worship is not strong enough to prevent God from choosing the Jewish people. Lashon Hara is. Any questions? Dick, you had a question, Bob?
Yeah, one question that kind of bothers me is, we read, and I don't remember the percentage, whether it's 20 or 40, but from one generation to the next, we lost a significant number of people when they left from Egypt. It was like
only
4/5, 80%.
80%. So where are we a nation if we lost 80% of our people?
What do you mean?
I mean,
That's
we
what-
didn't
So,
really
so,
unite.
so here is a story. They were united. However, someone who did not believe in redemption is not worthy of being redeemed. And those 80% did not believe that God will come and take them. So therefore, God says, you don't believe. How many stories I shared with you, and people believe they will bend their reality. They'll make reality. There was I wanted to keep it short. There was a story in Russia after the communists took over, and the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, was able to escape. He was kicked out from Russia because the Imach Shemom, the communists, they knew that he's the biggest challenge in all of Russia. He sent out teachers all over and
MSFs.
funded, and so they forced them to leave to Poland in 1880. I think they forced them, 1888 maybe. Anyway, he moved to Warsaw, and then he was in Warsaw until the Second World War. There is a book called Inferno, where a very high SS officer saved the Rebbe. He dressed him like a Nazi. He went through Berlin in the midst of the Second World War, the previous Rebbe, and escaped to America. He came in February 2nd of 1940. I want to talk about one thing. In those dark days, in Russia, it was forbidden to study Torah. The Hasidim, they were crying and longing to see the Rebbe, and they couldn't see the Rebbe. So one day they were sitting at a Farbrengen, you know what a Farbrengen is, and they started pouring their heart. There really was reasons to cry. And one of the Hasidim says, we all want to go to the Rebbe. So let's put chairs and create like a train. And then we're going to sit on the train, and we're going to have a conductor, and he's going to say, we're going to the Rebbe. And everybody is going to say, hurrah, hooray, hooray, and we'll make the sound of a train. At least for a moment, we can let go of the pain and suffering, we can see the Rebbe. Some of the Hasidim said, sure, let's do it. And others said, are you crazy? Are you loony? You lost your mind. The Rebbe is not here. We'll never get out of the Iron Curtain. It's not going to happen. Making the story short, every single one of those Hasidim who sat on those chairs merited to escape Russia and see the Rebbe. Every single one. And we're talking about giant people of giant stature. People who studied Torah and who were teaching and putting their life on the line did not escape Russia and did not see the Rebbe. Because imagination is another powerful tool that allows us to bend reality. I call it reality bender. The imagination, positive imagination will bend reality. Now let's continue.
Now you know what I'm holding it back over.
No. The guy in
Why are you going in the back? I didn't get it. Today I don't get your joke.
I'm sitting with the imagination.
Oh, so over here.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm not gonna let you off. I need to finish. I told you a story. It doesn't mean that we can.
Is it the moon?
Emuna, not to emuna. Emuna is faith. Bitachon, trust that it will happen. Okay, there is so much to be said, but we're talking about Lashon Hara today.
Yes.
Why?
Since God chose Israel as his inheritance at the time of the Exodus from Egypt, the spiritual state and level of the Jews, that is, their virtues, were not that significant. For their designation as God's people came solely as a result of his choice. It's God's choice. It's nothing to do what I do or don't do. However, all the above is relevant with regards to other sins and transgressions they committed, whereas the sin of malicious gossip, by contrast, is different, as will be explained. And the Rebbe said, goes on, I want to keep it short. The Rebbe says that there are three grave impacts with Lashon Hara. Number one, it causes damage. It hurts the person we speak about. Because when people hear about that person's bad behavior or conduct, they will not do business with them. They will not socialize. So it causes harm to the person you speak. As the Mishnah said, it kills three people: the speaker, the one who hears, and the one whom they speak about. But let's talk about the person that they speak about. They're going to hurt him. Number two, you are bringing into the surface a negative trait of a human. When someone is misbehaving and nobody talks about it and nobody hears, it's still in hiding. So the effect or the negativity of it is very limited. By contrast, when someone speaks about it, he brought it up into the open, it will have a very negative effect 10 times, many, many times as much as it was before somebody spoke about it. So far, so good. But here is the third one, the most important. When we speak about somebody, even if it's not malicious, we are creating a separation from one another. Says the Rebbe, every sin has a negative impact. When someone did not keep kosher, when someone did not tell the truth, when someone speak to Pharaoh about Moshe, they did bring negativity about somebody else, and they did impact negatively the person they speak about. But there is nothing there that affects the unit between a Jew and another Jew. Idol worship, adultery, idolatry, all that. The first two, bringing negativity out, harming the person that's involved, that's true. But there is no separation between the two Jews. Lashon Hara is unique, that nothing else is compared to, in a way that it causes a rift between two Jews. Says the Rebbe, when God chose the Jewish people as one nation means all-inclusive. When someone worship idols, he does not touch the core of the one nation. When someone lies, they do not touch the core of one nation. When someone speaks Lashon Hara, malicious gossip, or not even malicious, they're creating a rift. They're separating themselves from that person or that person from them. And by doing so, they are not allowing God to choose one nation. And therefore, Moshe had worried when he says, why? Vayira Moshe feared, why are they not going to be getting redeemed? Why are they worthy to stay in exile more than 70 nations? He says, now I know why, because people Lashon Hara, they refuse to allow God to choose them as one nation. It's the core of what defines a nation. And therefore, says the Rebbe,
Last paragraph.
Okay, so and this is the point that is relevant to our discussion. So now we understand what bothered Moshe and why is it different than all other nations. And now we understand why Moshe was satisfied once he see there is Lashon Hara. He says, therefore, they deserve to be enslaved because slavery will crush their evil. The evil is what let a person speak gossip or speak maliciously about somebody else. Once they are enslaved, they will be crushed and humbled to a point of allowing their godly soul to rule, not the animal soul, and therefore they will refrain from Lashon Hara. That's why Rashi breaks it into two parts. And I think the lesson is very important that if of every mitzvah we must obey God, the mitzvah of Lashon Hara is many, many times more, because aside from the fact that it kills 3 people, aside from the fact that it brings out negativity into the open that has a very negative impact, it actually hurts God in the way that God wants everyone to us to be as a nation, and now is breaking that core of God's choice. Good Shabbos.
Shabbat.